Good evening and welcome to DarkHour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser. And tonight, folks, man, we've got one great show for you. I know that's been the mantra lately, but every time it's proven to be true. So we're going to keep on that tip. Honestly, tonight, folks, we have some great guests with us. And some of these names you're going to know, you are familiar with, you've heard before. I, of course, am joined by my good friend, Gutter Gawker, and he will be here with us tonight as well, talking to these folks. Guys, I have Lon Strickler, I have Tobias Wayland, and I have Manny Navarette here to talk with us tonight about Mothman. And I'm sure we'll get into the legend, but I think we're going to stick to some of the more recent sightings that have happened around Chicago, and we're going to share those experiences with you, talk about them, intellectualize them, analyze them, whatever you guys want to do. We're going to jump on this. So if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We will address them as we go and try to get every single last one of you. Now, before we get started, for those of you who are not familiar with my guests this evening, I'm going to give you a quick bio on each. Okay? Lon Strickler is a Fortean researcher, author and publisher of the syndicated Phantoms and Monsters blog. He began the blog in 2005, which has steadily grown in popularity and is read daily by tens of thousands of paranormal enthusiasts, investigators, and those seeking the truth. His research and reports have been featured on hundreds of online media sources. Several of these published reports have been presented in various television segments, including the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Sci-Fi's Paranormal Witnesses, Fact or Faked, Paranormal Files, and Destination America's Monsters and Mysteries in America. He has been interviewed on several radio broadcasts, including multiple guest appearances on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome, Lon Strickler. In addition, we have Tobias Wayland, who is a passionate Fortean who has been actively investigating the unusual for over a decade. The first several years of his investigative career were spent as a MUFON field investigator, and following that, he investigated independently prior to becoming the head writer and editor of the Singular Fortean Society. Tobias is a frequent guest on various podcasts and radio shows, has contributed to several books on the paranormal, and is often invited to speak at paranormal conferences and events. He was also featured in the Small Town Monsters documentary Terror in the Skies and the series premiere of Expedition X for his work investigating Mothman sightings around Lake Michigan. All right. And last but not least, man, this is a great lineup. I'm so excited for tonight, guys. I hope you are too. Manny Navarette is the founder and curator of UFO Clearinghouse and is an active paranormal investigator. He is currently one of the chief investigators of the Chicago Lake Michigan Mothman phenomenon, along with Lon Strickler and Tobias Wayland, and a member of the Phantom and Monsters 14 research team. Manuel has been interested in the paranormal since the age of 17 and has had multiple sightings of UFOs and recently of a winged humanoid around Chicago O'Hare Airport. The website he founded, UFO Clearinghouse, is a website dedicated and committed to providing the most up-to-date information on recent UFO sightings, reported alien abductions, and cryptid sightings. It is designed to be a place where information can be freely exchanged and accessed by paranormal researchers and investigators for the reason of furthering the search for the truth. Now, very quickly, I'm going to let you guys know we have all this information in the description. You can check it out at your leisure, as well as each one of these incredible individuals' lines of work. So for Manny, if you'd like to visit him, he's at www.ufoclearinghouse.com. And Tobias is at singularfortean.com. And Lon Strickler can be reached at phantomsandmonsters.com or check out his arcaneradio.podbean.com, and you will enjoy it very much, folks. I guarantee it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our guests. Please, everybody, give a nice warm welcome to Tobias, Gutter, Lon, and Manny.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, guys. Hey, folks.
Thank you for joining us, everybody, tonight.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited because I'm from Chicago, and I love Mothman. This is one of my favorite subjects after UFOs, so I can't wait to get into it tonight. Sorry for stealing your guys' thunder there real quick.
I hope we can get into the connection between Mothman and UFOs, and perhaps cryptids in general and UFOs. I think there is a definitive connection there. Would any of you guys agree or disagree with that?
Oh yeah, there is a connection. We've even had sightings. We've had an investigation where we've had somebody who has stated that they have seen not only just the Mothman, but they've seen what they consider or what sounds like the typical gray alien with them, along with two human women who seem to be either hybrids or they were entranced in some way. But they were seen together and by a witness. And then seconds later, there's a brilliant blue light, and all that was left was just a Mothman or the winged humanoid, and the winged humanoid just took off into the air. And that happened in Rosemont. So
interesting.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a connection somehow, though. More recently with the sighting that Manuel just described, and of course, there was a later UFO sighting in the cemetery, the small cemetery located on the O'Hara grounds, where some type of humanoid ascended from the graveyard up into the UFOs. So, I don't know if that was actually a winged humanoid, but then again, 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't think too many humanoids are being ascending into UFOs. So, I think there may be a connection somehow.
Sure, it's impossible to ignore, if nothing else, the geographic proximity of these phenomena. So regardless of any other correlation you want to make, like the fact is, people are seeing UFOs, people are seeing other types of humanoids in the same areas as people are reporting these flying humanoids, and so to my mind, that's just impossible to ignore. Like, we don't know what the connection might be yet, but it's certainly an avenue of exploration that I think deserves our attention.
Now, that being said, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
I completely agree with the guests. There is something to the UFO phenomenon in regards to Mothman. I believe that with most cryptids, to be honest with you, but specifically Mothman, there's just something out of this world about him.
Oh, definitely. I mean, some of the characteristics that have been described, are beyond what you would consider normal. I mean, the ability to shoot straight up into the air being one. I mean, physiologically, that's impossible unless you're strapped with a rocket engine or something. But I mean, even birds can't do that. Just ascend straight up into the air and achieve flight without using their wings. There has been a lot of different sightings where he's just simply disappeared. And that kind of lends to one of the theories of it being multidimensional, maybe able to come in and out as it pleases, because O'Hare is a very, very busy place. I can attest to that because I work in trucking and I frequently go to a lot of the cargo hubs in and around Chicago to meet my drivers or to take paperwork or whatnot. And these places it could be 1 o'clock in the morning and it's wall to wall people at these places. So this thing is popping in and out without being seen, or being seen and then just simply disappearing in front of people's eyes. But yeah, a lot of it is, there are a lot of characteristics that just don't match with what something you would see as far as, physiologically able to do, by any terrestrial creature.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to piggyback on that briefly, if you look at the physical description that people describe of this being, I mean, its wingspan isn't big enough to support something of that size. Like, it just doesn't make sense that it should even be flying around. But that's what people are describing. I mean, like you think, for a 6 foot humanoid, for instance, and most of the descriptions vary between, like 6 to 8 feet roughly. As far as height, you would need, like a 20-foot wingspan. Like, you would have to have a much bigger wingspan than the 10 to 15 feet commonly reported for these sightings. So, I mean, there's certainly some sort of paranormal aspect to this that defies conventional physics.
Lon, what other abilities does Mothman have that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I guess as far as what's been going on in and around Chicago, the fact that this thing does not use its wings for the most part, like Manuel said, it has the ability to jettison directly from the ground up into the air. I have talked to witnesses who have seen this thing literally disappear while in flight, as if it went through an invisible doorway. It's quite fleeting, very quickly seen and then gone. By the time the witness is picking their jaw off the ground, they don't have enough time to get a phone photograph of this thing. We've had some indiscernible photographs, but nothing really tangent as of yet. But just like most other phenomena, especially with cryptids, I think there is another genre of the paranormal associated with this, be it either some type of spirit summoning, or something to do with the occult, or a UFO, even possibly witchcraft. I don't know, but it's just when we started investigating this intently in 2017, we were being thrown all kinds of variables. And be quite frank with you, other than the interdimensional theory, I don't think there's anything we can really hang our hat on. Even though we can't prove it's an interdimensional entity, I'm pretty sure that we have proven that it's not indigenous.
That's the other thing. I mean, if you're talking
Now,
about,
how does this?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say. I mean, since Lon brings up, the idea of indigenous animal species, that's another really important point, I think, that we have to look at, because he's absolutely right. When you look at things like habitat and just overall ecology, for something like this, it doesn't add up. I mean, like, what is it eating? Where does it live that people haven't discovered it? Something that size, living so close to an urban environment. I mean, like, if it was a mundane animal species, like any sort of just mundane biological species, we should know about it. It just doesn't make sense.
Now, with the Point Pleasant event, it was first spotted near an area called the TNT site, as I remember. And, people had the feeling that it was kind of coming from this area, maybe not necessarily originating, but it was coming from that, living in that space. Around O'Hare Airport, is there anything like that could be a draw, or somewhere we could pinpoint to say there's a possibility that he might be coming from here, as the way they did in West Virginia?
The West Virginia sightings, I believe, and you talked about the TNT area, which was the West Virginia Ordnance Works. And that's where most of the sightings were at. I believe, and I have believed for a long time, that there's a lot of heavy spirit energy in that area. Now, I believe it's possibly from Native Americans that used to dominate the area. I think the Mothman at West Virginia was a summoned being. Now, is it a summoned being in Chicago? I don't know. But I have strongly thought that this being in Point Pleasant was summoned. And the fact that there was all kinds of other things going on and at Point Pleasant, let alone, what happened with the Silver Bridge, which I don't believe it's a harbinger of anything. Like, I just think with 46 people dying, in a small town, and then you've had other phenomena occurring before that. It was kind of used as an excuse as to explain why all these people died. But there was a lot going on. I mean, you had the Men in Black, you had the UFOs, there was a lot of paranormal stuff going on. And it still occurs. I mean, I get sighting reports out of that Mason County area all the time, all up and down the Ohio River Valley. It's a hot area. And not unlike some places in the United States and North America. But, it still occurs. It's not something that just happened then and, it stopped.
I got to jump in here at this point, guys, because you guys are getting me really excited here because you're bringing up O'Hare, you're bringing up UFOs, and you're bringing up Mothman. And in my opinion, there's something about the Des Plaines River and Mothman and UFOs. I think they kind of like that path. They follow waterways. It heads up to O'Hare. And I think, in my opinion, O'Hare is a big portal. There's a big portal that we can't see above O'Hare that allows a lot of these UFOs and paranormal things to come in, because a lot of the stuff that I do encounter is around O'Hare Airport. But that's what I wanted to chime in real quick about, Michael.
Well, Gutter, I really agree with you on that. And you working at O'Hare, you should know that, as far as like places to hide and stuff like that, Chicago, the entire Chicago area is just riddled with tunnels and underground passages. O'Hare's no different. There are tunnels that go back and forth. Some of them used all the time. Some of them rarely used. If anything wanted to really hide out and stay out of sight, the Chicago area is just perfect. There's places.
There was a military base right there at O'Hare.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people forget about. I'm sure there's tons of tunnels underneath O'Hare. That might be another aspect. Is this a Mothman being hooked up with the government somehow? Does anybody ever know of any government studies in a Mothman, Tobias?
I haven't heard any. There has been some talk, and I know Manny can speak to this from as early as 2017 of honestly, like, police reports going missing, the city kind of wanting to hush up any of these reports for various reasons. But I haven't seen anything specifically that would lead me to believe that there is a strong government connection as far as the origin of the Mothman or flying humanoids or anything else. I can say that my limited interaction, with say local police regarding investigating these sightings has been largely positive. Like my one big FOIA hit was from the what was it? McHenry County Sheriff's Department, and they were very helpful. So they certainly weren't trying to cover anything up. So I don't know.
And we have had different. We've had at O'Hare, we've had TSA officers, we've had security officers who have given us reports, and people who have seen it. We've submitted FOIA reports to have them come back denied or saying that there's nothing there. We've actually had government officials who worked within City Hall in Chicago telling us, citing reports and telling us that, City Hall knows about this, but they just want to keep it quiet. This was pre-corona, like back in the 2017 flap, people saying that, they want to keep it hush because they don't want to scare the tourists away. And we also had, the one lady that I talked to you about earlier about the with the sighting with the gray and the people. She was approached. We had just barely gotten the preliminary report, hadn't even had a chance to set up interviews and everything. And she was approached by somebody telling her that she needed to keep quiet about. And they approached her. Not only did they approach her about this, they approached her at work. She was at lunch with another coworker when the person approached her and said that he was an investigator and that she needed to, rethink about her submission. And we had to really, kind of jump through hoops to tell her that that wasn't us. It hadn't even left the group yet. As far as, getting somebody assigned to talk to her or anything. And she comes back saying that, somebody had approached her and at work at that. And it had really scared her.
You had mentioned something about the airport and being a possible conduit for weird activity. There are a lot of airports, especially here in the United States, that when they were built at locations that were very questionable, and there's no rhyme or reason why they were built there. This is an avenue I've been exploring more recently since the sightings have been going on in O'Hara. Denver Airport is that's a perfect example. But there are a lot of others where a lot of strange things have been seen. And I'm just wondering if O'Hara might fit that bill. Now, O'Hara's been around a while, but, who knows? Maybe there is some type of connection somewhere as to why O'Hara is this draw to weird activity.
Maybe there's a genetics lab over there creating Mothmen, Lon. You never know.
Well, you don't know. There's something. The one thing we have looked at, even though it's out in Cook County, is the Fermi Labs and the accelerator that's out there. They have the oldest accelerator in the world. Quite frankly, it's over 40 years old. They keep talking about this thing being shut down, but there's a hell of a lot of activity going on over there all the time. And, we don't know if that's involved, but it's something you got to consider. There's a lot of stuff in the Chicago area, and there's a lot of stuff people just don't know about. So, it's just one other facet that we're looking into.
Well, O'Hare Airport is highly restrictive airspace, and the people that work there have to go through many, many background checks. Me being one of those people, so anybody that has a story out of O'Hare that's coming from an employee, I would think that story is very credible. And you guys, you say you hear them a lot. Who knows the best O'Hare story for Mothman?
Yeah. I mean, it is very restrictive. I can attest to that. I work with the cargo areas, and they're very restrictive over there. And that, in a way, it's also kind of led us to having problems with our investigations, because we've had people who go out there who are also trying to follow the investigations, and they decide to actually trespass onto the property. I've had people who come back and tell us that, hey, we saw these guys, they were looking for the Mothman, they were out there with their cameras, and they decided, let's scale the fence. Not exactly a great way to, if you want to find out what the inside of a federal detention cell looks like, I mean, that's the best way to do it, or get shot in the process, especially post 9/11. But it is, I mean, what gets us, one of the biggest conundrums with our investigation is O'Hare is, like you said, very restrictive. And it's so large. A lot of people, if you don't live in Chicago, it's very hard to imagine that this airport is essentially a small city, and it's spread out over such a massive area. Take into consideration all of the cargo container areas, all of the cargo areas where you have things being offloaded and loaded onto semis, and then just the passenger area is just a small, tiny area of O'Hare. And this thing could easily just hide out anywhere. And, a lot of people have seen it. I mean, a lot of people that are airport employees, pilots, people who work, in and around the areas, the different facilities. The latest one we had was from the FedEx facility right there.
What was that one? What did they describe?
Well, that one, that's the one I got to interview today. And they were coming they were headed home. This was about 4:00 in the morning or so. And they were walking toward their car, and this thing flew overhead and landed ahead of them. and they started screaming. Actually, the report is quite, Lon and Tobias know about this report, had some very colorful language associated with it. But they were scared. These were two older ladies, and this thing basically kind of in nature. There's a thing they call a mock charge, where like a bear or a moose or something will act like it's charging towards you just to get you to back off and kind of get scared. That's what this thing did. It screeched at them. It was, kind of making a screech, and these two women, in their words, they hauled ass, trying to get to their car, trying to get away, and this thing just took off into the air and disappeared. But as it was flying away, they could hear it screeching, and they said that it sounded like, they said, like she said, she'd take 10 or 12 little girls and put them together and make them all scream at the same time. It almost sounded like it was screeching at different pitches and different keys all at the same time. And just literally scared the living daylights. They thought the devil himself had come for them.
Sure.
It was just a really, really interesting interview. That was the latest one. I mean, we've had the two pilots who've come forth, and we've had them also telling us that, pilots, of course, like to talk. They like to chat amongst themselves, and, via social media or anything. And a lot of people are very familiar with the Mothman. The Chicago Mothman, some of them call it Batman.
Well, they're calling it the O'Hara Mothman out there.
Yeah. There's just so many. These people are all very familiar with the stories of the Mothman and the old Chicago winged humanoid. And
well, let me ask real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I caught the pause there. I'll just throw this out real quick. Lon had mentioned that, Mothman never really went away. But I was under the impression there was a period of time where there was a lull in experiences and sightings. So if that was the case, is this the same Mothman that we're dealing with that was in the legend from West Virginia, or is this something new? Was there a point where it's something? It's the same. I'm sorry.
I don't think it's the same thing. I mean, the description of the Mothman at Point Pleasant was that of an insectoid, moth-like, butterfly-like winged being. It was stout. It did have the red eyes, but it was kind of set into the body like a moth would be. And the wings, of course, were like that of a moth. I mean, basically, that's how it got the name. These beings that are, for the most part, of what's being seen in and around the Chicago area and the upper Midwest is a bat-winged, gargoyle-wing-like being with the wingspan anywhere from 10 to 15 foot. Most of the sightings, this being stands like 5 to 6 foot, kind of emaciated body, humanoid body with legs and arms either attached to the wings or detached to the wings. Some have red eyes, but for the most part, it's dark in color. And, this is what people are describing. And it's not like everybody knows about this thing. I mean, we get reports from people who have no idea of these reports that have been going on. And, when you tell them it's been going on, they seem relieved. But, the witnesses, for the most part, and I'd say 99% of the witnesses have been very forthright and they don't always embellish on what they talk about originally. Very upstanding witnesses, which is something you just don't really see in the cryptid world. People can tend to embellish on a story to try to fit the narration and try to make the investigator happy, to that extent. But no, that's not what's been going on. These people are seeing something. And it is a frustrating phenomena because we have a lot of detractors, we have a lot of skeptics, But, we have learned that we just got to let that roll off our backs, because it does seem that there are some people out there that want to keep this quiet and don't want it getting out there. But it is getting out there, and I think it's going to continue to get out there.
And as far
Thank
as
you for the clarification. Yeah.
and as far as it being the same as the Point Pleasant, again, physical description, but I believe Tobias had a report that he had one time that the lady he saw, what was it, I think 3 of them flying overhead. She was in the backyard. And
Yeah, it was 3 or 4.
Multiple Mothman? That's crazy. I got to hear this.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that one actually. Yeah, here we go. So this was from September 8th, 2001. Spoke to a lady in Berwyn, Illinois, who said that she had seen 4-winged humanoids with red eyes. And let's see here. So it said this was back in 2001, and she said that she was out in her backyard in Berwyn, which is next to Cicero, so just outside of Chicago.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean it's right where everything's happening. And she said that they were having a picnic, and it was about 9 or 10 at night. So at that point, like, obviously the picnic is over, and she was outside cleaning up, and she looked up in the air, and it was a really nice night. The moon was out, and it was kind of cloudy, but she's got like these tiki torches back there, and they're kind of like throwing light on everything, so she can see pretty well. And she's by herself. Everybody else is inside, and she looks up and she sees these 4 huge. She described them as looking like winged people. She said that they had the shape of men, right, with wings, and that they were all black. They weren't feathery at all. Like, she didn't describe them as being bird-like or anything similar. She said that they had bat wings or demon wings. And they were all in a row flying overhead, and it scared the crap out of her, frankly. And she held on to this story for almost 2 decades before she saw that other people had been reporting these sightings. At which point she reached out to me, and I contacted her and we spoke. But yeah, I mean, honestly. And I know Lon touched on this just a little bit, but this is a very common narrative that you'll find from witnesses in these sighting reports. Most people outside of our weird little clique, like, they've never heard of Mothman. They don't know anybody who believes in winged humanoids or has seen anything even remotely similar. And quite often what will happen is they'll have their sighting, and like, they'll tell a loved one, might be a spouse or a sibling or a parent or just a close friend, and that person will laugh at them, and then they just don't talk about it. They don't talk about it ever again until they find that there are other people who have had similar sightings and who have reported things like what they'd seen, and at that point, they'll talk about their experience. But that was the case with this woman.
Wow. So, that's amazing. Multiple Mothman. I would love to see it.
And in 2007,
a lot of questions coming in fast and furious from the chat room. Sorry for interrupting you guys, but I want to throw one out there from Third Phase of the Moon, who's joined us in the chat. He wants to know, can anyone on the panel direct me to a good video or photo of the Mothman? Lon, maybe you should take that one.
Well, I mean, if they have it, I'd like to see it. We just haven't gotten one yet. Like I said, these sightings have been so fleeting and so quick, for the most part, that by the time the people are over being shocked, they just don't have the time. But they're just not quick enough to get a photograph or a video of it. I wish we did have it, but it's just not there.
Has anybody seen? Has anybody seen Mothman in the daytime? There's a lot of questions coming in, Lon.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of daytime sightings.
Yeah,
many. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I'd say 60% of them were at night, but there have been a lot of daytime sightings, and that's just we have this point right now. We've got 105 documented sightings since 2011, but we've got a myriad number of sightings before that.
Are there moth women?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if there's a unisex thing or not with Mothman or moth women. I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard anything that as described as being some type, either a difference of sex or such. I haven't heard that yet.
These are the questions coming in from the chat. I'm just repeating them. Michael, take it away, brother.
No, that was a good question, because you look at Bigfoot and there's pictures and videos that you might be able to discern the sex. And that's always a question I have when looking into any cryptids. Is there another counterpart? Is there that other side that we're looking at? Therefore, we can maybe say there's a possibility that there's something organic about this. There's something familiar now. We have the sexes, but I understand what you guys are saying. There have been a lot of sightings, but the fleeting aspect of it, how quickly it occurs, how quickly it happens in front of people, and of course the shock aspect of being in that experience. I understand why there isn't that much evidence, but I do have a feeling, especially with this particular phenomenon, we're going to see more of it in the coming years than possibly we've even seen in the past.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's probably true.
And as far as like the daytime sightings, I mean, we've had, touching on what we were talking earlier with Tobias about multiple sightings. 2017, the lady who saw them on the waterfront, she was out there with her boyfriend and her boyfriend's dad. They had brought the boat out of storage and were actually taking it to the marina and to tie up for the season. And she looks up and there's two of these winged beings, and she says they were circling each other doing figure eights. She said that they'd come down low, swoop back up. She said it's actually quite beautiful. It's like they were flying almost in unison with one another. And then we had the one lady who saw during the eclipse that happened a few years ago. They were out there trying to get pictures of the eclipse, and they saw a winged humanoid. And I remember that it was funny because they're trying to rip the lenses off the cameras because they had those cameras outfitted with lenses to try to get pictures of the eclipse, but they were trying to take pictures of this flying thing going by, and they couldn't rip the lenses off fast enough to do this. But we've had quite a few daytime sightings as far as the Mothman goes.
Does anybody know if Mothman is the Bat Squatch?
We've had one instance, a series of sightings in Woodstock.
Are they the same entity?
Are they the same entity? Yes.
No, they're not the same thing. I this thing that was seen in Woodstock was what I would call a Bat Squatch. If you want to consider it being something that's similar to a Bigfoot, that being and we had 3 sightings out there in Woodstock. The FOIA report came from one of those sightings, and it was described as a Bigfoot with wings, basically. That's basically what they called it. I mean, and there were footprints in the snow that were photographed. Now, if that's what you want to call a Bat Squatch, hey, that's fine with me. You can call it anything you want. But, it's much different than what we had gotten, as far as sightings go. But that one was quite different.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's an important point to make, too. A lot of these sightings have featured variation in the descriptions of the actual creature. So, we have seen a pattern develop of what Lon had talked about before, of this sort of like emaciated humanoid with like a bat-like wing structure. But there have been reports of something much similar or much more similar to what was reported back in Point Pleasant with the squatter shape, the head more sunken into the shoulders, the glowing red eyes, and then in Woodstock, you've got this. I guess Bat Squatch is as good as anything. A handful of people said that they saw this Bigfoot with bat-like leathery gargoyle wings, basically. And Emily and I went down there and we talked to some witnesses, and boy, did that guy seem credible. Like you can. It's one thing to read about these things on the internet, or in a book or something, but when you're at somebody's house, and you're face to face with them, and they have no reason to lie to you because, quite frankly, like the story is insane, and you can tell they're scared, and they're very forthcoming. Like it's a powerful experience, and that was Woodstock. So it's weird, and I don't know why we have the level of variation in these descriptions that we do, other than that there must be more than one type of creature out there. I would suppose.
Hey, Tobias, I think I had seen Mothman twice. Can I tell you guys what I saw?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yes, please.
And maybe it fits into similar characteristics that you guys. Back in 2008, I got injured on the job at O'Hare Airport, and I went through a series of back surgeries for 3 years. I had one after the other for like 3 years in a row. So I got used to my backyard lawn chair pretty well because I was in a lot of pain. But in 2010, I remember looking up and seeing what I was in Forest Park, Illinois, looking east towards the city, but straight up over the trees. And it looked like a big, giant devil bird flew out, was flying south to north. It didn't flap, it glided. And when I looked at its eyes, it looked like it had red eyes like a fly. Like any direction you were to look in at its eyes, it was pretty much bioluminescent. It seemed to give off the certain same glow. And it came out to me in the same direction the following year, doing the same exact thing. It didn't flap. It just glided by, and it looked like a huge, giant devil bird. Has anybody else explained it the same way?
Forest Park has been a hot area. We have had, oh my God, at least 4 or 5 sightings.
Look, I'm holding myself because I'm so, I'm talking about it. I'm nervous.
I had one in particular sighting in Forest Park by a retired police officer. He was visiting his mother. He was a police officer in Chicago. He had retired. He moved to Michigan. He was at his mother's visiting. Before he left to go back home, he was out walking her dog. It was early evening. It was still light outside. And as he was walking, the dog started freaking out. And he noticed on top of a roof, not far from one of the subway stations there, of a gargoyle red-eyed being that was standing on the roof and described very much like what you described. And these things have been seen. I mean, this is something that's been seen all over the city. We've got some neighborhoods that have had many more sightings than other. Forest Park, Lincoln Park, Little Village is probably the hottest area. And of course, Rosemont out, into Cicero and down up into the airport. Those seem to be the areas where most of the sightings have been concentrated at. Now, is it the same being? I don't think so. I mean, I think there were in 2007, I think there were at least 3 sightings of 3 different beings. Now, of course, Tobias mentioned early on the sightings were very similar to the Point Pleasant Mothman with the insectoid wing. Then, of course, we had a couple that people were calling an owlman, a lechusa, or something that looked like a large owl. But that kind of, those sightings came through MUFON. Manuel was able to talk to one of the witnesses, but, when you get a report from MUFON, you don't get any information other than what they have on the CMS. So, you're kind of limited there to talking to witness. But beyond 4 to 5 first early sightings from MUFON, these sightings were of beings that had a membrane wing like that of a bat or a gargoyle. So, and like everybody's been saying, these witnesses, they're really forthright. And, I get on the phone, of course, I don't live in Chicago. I'm talking to people on the phone, and Emmanuel and Tobias are able to talk some of these people in person. But I'm telling you, when they call you, especially after they Google you and Google what they saw and they see your contact information, they're scared, and it's palpable when you talk to them, and you knows they saw something.
And Gutter, where you're talking about with your sighting, and it is right. Forest Park is a very hot area. I remember one sighting that I investigated of that was nearby from you in Oak Park. Of the
Right next door.
Yeah, the one where the lady was out taking her children to the store, and this thing swooped in and basically terrorized them.
Was that the River Forest one? Are you speaking about River Forest?
Yeah.
River Forest. Yeah, that's right next to me. That was creepy. Is at Concordia College? Yeah, it flew out of the Thatcher Park woods. I remember that story. You guys get shared a lot on Twitter. A lot of people share your stories. I see a lot of people mentioning Mothman, and I'll see your website. I think it's Tobias's. What's it called, Tobias?
The Singular Fortean Society. The website, the URL is just Singular Fortean, because my wife assured me that the SingularForteanSociety.com was way too long for like a website URL, so we just shortened it to Singular Fortean.
Michael, go ahead.
Is it just here in America? Is it just here in America that Mothman's been sighted, or are there other cases outside of our country?
Some of the most famous ones would be, the Owlman of Cornwall in England. There's been the Blackbird of Chernobyl that was apparently seen right before the nuclear accident. There was a report of a winged humanoid seen circling over the reactor that went critical after the 9.0 earthquake in Japan. The gentleman had come home, and his friend who was still in Japan called him and said, look what's happening. And he gets on the TV and he sees the very facility that they had seen this creature circling, now, in the middle of a meltdown. There's been a report. There was a report out of a person at O'Hare who had seen a winged humanoid in Mexico a week before the massive earthquake in the 80s that killed so many people. He was outside playing and as a child, and they saw this thing circling an open field, and it flew away. And a week later, that massive earthquake hit Mexico City. And which is ironic. My wife was actually involved in that earthquake. She wasn't my wife yet, but of course, my future wife was there when it happened. But there have been reports throughout, history. There have been reports of troops in Vietnam who've been on patrol to seeing winged humanoids fly over. They've been from all over the world. There have been sightings of this. I believe it was Germany. Was it Germany that the gentleman had seen it right before a mine collapse? It actually stepped
I think it might have been.
Yeah, it stepped in front of them, and and within an hour, I believe the mine that they were working in collapsed. And if they had, it was just. This is where a lot of this harbinger of doom thing kind of Point Pleasant didn't help. But a lot of people say that it's a harbinger of some kind. Honestly, I feel that's, I don't buy it. I'm skeptical of that. But this thing is a worldwide phenomenon.
It just seems to be more concentrated in North America, especially the United States. Sure, there have been historical sightings worldwide, but as far as more recent sightings within the last 20 years, the number of sightings in the United States just is astounding as compared to the rest of the world. Now, why that is, I have no idea. It does seem that people are much more open to reporting this type of phenomena now as compared to what they used to be. But, we do get small flaps here and there. In the area where I live in particular, I had an encounter back in '88, and there were 5 other encounters since that time. There have been other winged humanoids seen in this area as well. One of our investigators on our team, Timothy Renner, he has been given reports of sightings. He lives near me. So, yeah, I mean, it does seem to be concentrated in certain areas, but of course it's being seen all over the country as well.
Amazing. Can we get into the UFO aspect of this again? It's another part of my favorite, subjects in regards to this. Sorry to steal all your thunder tonight, Michael. I'm really excited excited that these guys are here.
Please.
Well, I shared my 2 Mothman sightings with you guys. I believe it firmly that that's. Did you guys see the lightning above me? It was pretty a firm sighting that I have, but I had my own sighting that I had written into MUFON about. I've seen UFOs consistently since 2009. I can get into all the different times I've seen them, but one of the ones that I wanted to tell you about that I wrote into actually a MUFON investigator, I think his name was William Leone, who asked me to email him. And it was I was working Terminal 2 at O'Hare, and we were getting ready to push a plane back. And I was one of the wing walkers in the back, and I was just chilling out in the back. And I looked up and I saw through what was like sort of partially moving clouds, what looked like a helicopter coming through the clouds. I said, "What the hell is a helicopter doing above the terminal?" And I looked at it again, and what looked like a helicopter turned into like a motorcycle helmet. It was very dark, but it had a glossy cover to the front. It was oblong. I guess it came down towards me, and it changed into a upside down black pyramid that was shimmering. It was quite an amazing sight. People were coming around with me. They're all trying to whip out their cell phones, record it. There's 3 different towers around me at the time that all had to be filled with cameras. This had to be seen by thousands of people. I didn't want to get on the radio and start yelling about it, but it was just such an amazing sight that I could not believe it. You know, I know people talk about the 2006 O'Hare UFO, which I actually investigated the 2 guys that first saw it because I work with them, but I wanted to talk about my own personal sighting that I saw. It morphed. It changed into a giant black pyramid that hovered over the airport. There was many people with me seeing this, and for some reason, I never heard a peep about it other than my email to the MUFON investigator.
Well, I'll tell you something.
Go ahead.
O'Hara has a tendency to get a lot of sightings of different things shut down. I have talked to people for years about phenomena at O'Hara, and a lot of it doesn't get out. I mean, and I don't know if that's the same with other airports, but I know in particular O'Hara, there's a lot of stuff that just does not get to the public's view. And the fact that the 2006 sighting even got out there, I believe, is pretty interesting because they do have a tendency to shut stuff up.
The first 2 ramp guys that saw it were pushing out a plane off a C-17, and they reported to the pilot. They said they saw something unsafe over the plane. When the pilot stuck his head out of the cabin window, he looked up and saw it. The co-pilot stuck his head out of the window and saw it. The flight attendant stuck her head out of the galley door and saw it. The pilot then reported it to the tower, asking if there was anything unsafe above them. The 2 ramp guys reported it as a large, giant pancake that was spinning in place. It was very dark.
O'Hara's got a reputation not only for UFO, but also ghost sightings and paranormal activity as well. Like I said before, like a lot of airports, there's no rhyme or reason as to why some have been built where they were built. As far as O'Hara goes, there just seems to be a lot of phenomena going on there. And, a lot of it just doesn't get out to the public.
Well, a lot of the O'Hare has quite a lot of UFOs, and We've had the one where was seen right over the cemetery that's there. There's actually a little cemetery in the middle of O'Hare. Actually quite spooky if you go out there in the middle of the night, but there was a sighting there of a UFO that hovered above it and something ascended into it. One of the very first UFO sightings that was reported to MUFON, the Mothman sightings that were reported to MUFON, they saw a UFO like within minutes of seeing a Mothman. They were saying that they were over the lake, they were out in the lake, and they saw the Mothman overhead, or a winged humanoid fly overhead, and within minutes they saw a green object that was above the water in the distance, off in the horizon, and it was going faster than most things. It was too low to be like a meteorite or a fireball of any kind, and it traveled east to west across the lake, and the lake is fairly large, so this thing was over open water. I've seen quite a lot of UFOs myself in and around this area. I've had people who've reported UFOs. The only problem I've ever had with O'Hare's UFOs is every once in a while you'll get a report and they'll send me a photo and they'll say, look, there's multiple UFOs up in the sky. And I'm looking out the window and like, no, those are planes stacked up ready to come land. But if you're looking at it from 20 miles away, it looks like, the world's biggest UFOs out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I mean, there have been multiple reports. O'Hare is very well known as a UFO hotspot. People have seen, big UFOs, small UFOs, and I think the fact that 2006 just happened and to get out into the public, kind of just cemented. A lot of people they think that that's a one-time thing. They just don't know that that's just the tip of the iceberg out there.
If you guys ever want to know the names of the first two guys that saw it, I'll give you their names and phone numbers, and you guys can investigate them.
Oh yes, I would love that.
Michael, what else you got for us, brother?
I'll be honest with you, I'm really enjoying listening to everyone talk about this subject tonight. My question I would move on to is, what about Mothman in our history? We see, different carvings in caves, and we see hieroglyphs, and we see things in Sumerian texts that were mentioned about aliens or, other phenomenon of such. What about Mothman? Is he there too? Is he in our history in paintings and on the caves?
Great question.
Well, I mean, I know with Hispanic and Latin American culture, there are winged humanoids. There's a flying serpent called Quetzalcoatl, who is a center of the Aztec and Mayan culture. And there are, beings passed down in history. Lon mentioned one, the lechuza. I grew up listening to tales, next to listening to tales of La Llorona, being told by my grandmother to try to scare us straight. The lechuza was the next one that they told us about. It was a witch who could transform herself into a giant owl, and she would sit outside your house, and she would call your name, and if you went outside, she took you away. But it is a very rock solid legend that's been passed down. It's been an urban myth that's been passed down for generations in the Hispanic community. And so when a lot of the Little Village and the Humble Park sightings started happening, a lot of people started saying it's a lechuza, because that's what they grew up listening. They grew up to their abuelitas telling them, hey, if you don't behave, the lechuza is going to take you away. So, to them, that was what they were seeing. The Little Village was, like Talon said, a huge hotspot, but there have been tons of different flying humanoids that have been, throughout history.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, that reminds me, there is, if you look at some of the representations of Thunderbirds, some of them look remarkably similar to what people have described when they're talking about, something like Mothman, for instance. There was this copper statue artifact recovered in New Hampshire that is attributed to the Pennacook tribe, the indigenous people of that area. And if you look at this thing, it looks very, very similar to what people have described, especially in Point Pleasant, some of the earlier Lake Michigan sightings, and then certain sightings sort of sporadically throughout that area. But it does look very, very similar to what people have been talking about. So I think that there is some precedent in North America for whatever this thing is, having interacted with people for quite some time.
I always look to the Native Americans or whatever indigenous tribe is in the area. To me, if you find the story in there, we're just catching up. They knew about it already. And there's a chance that, some of these specters that are out there, or, cryptids, there's a very good chance that at one point in our history, we were actually in balance with these beings, the way that some people practiced magic in white and dark senses, but used each of those appropriately for the time. It's just interesting to think about that somehow we might have become out of balance, and then out of knowledge and out of consciousness of this creature, wherein, as the thought had been brought up that this might have been raised at some point. You don't know. But you do see this in, or at least this phenomenon in our American cultures, in the Native American cultures.
That's true.
That's very interesting.
In a lot of UFO cases, people have talked about, in a lot of research I've done, you have had Native Americans that are like, they find something out in the field. Oh, those were the Star Brothers who were there, or they were the good Star Brothers, the bad Star Brothers. They knew about the visitors that came to this planet. Their grandfathers probably knew them. Like, it's kind of like almost like, hey Ralph, hey Hal, how you doing? They knew, they weren't afraid. They just knew it was natural order of things. It's the Sasquatch. They knew that they were the wild people of the forest. You respected them. You didn't harm them. Same thing with this. It could be just another, creature that, inhabited, would be like not an extraterrestrial, but an extra, oh God, there's a name for them, but it means that they've been here for far longer than we have. Ultra terrestrial, I believe is what it is. But yeah, you're right. A lot of the Native American tribes talk about some kind of flying creature, that they've seen, or they've talked about the chariots in the sky, the spinning shields in the sky that, that have brought the Star Brothers down. And, I try to stay away from a lot of that Star Brother stuff because it takes you down a whole different rabbit hole that's not conducive to with my research. But, you're right. A lot of this stuff you have seen, if you can go back into the Native American legends or anything, you will find some kind of correlation there.
Well, it's funny that you bring it up, Manny, because last night we had a crop circle researcher named Dr. Horace Drew. Did I say it right this time? Dr. Drew was talking about Quetzalcoatl.
You did.
so there's some synchronicity here tonight, Michael.
Got to work on that crop circle envisioning that he put us to. But no, that's interesting. Again, you go back to the Native Americans, or the people who've been on the land, and if they have some stories like that, chances are it's a real phenomenon. We're just catching up. What do you guys think about John Keel's work in this, or on this topic? Do you think that there was a good exposure for the legend, or do you feel it was more detrimental in certain ways? Did he stir the pot, muddy the waters?
Yeah, well, John Keel, he was a good journalist, and all good journalists like to tweak stories. When this stuff happened, the sightings of the Mothman in Point Pleasant, he kind of stirred things up a bit. Now, of course, when the bridge collapse occurred and the 46 people died, and of course, this harbinger of doom, portent of disaster theory started to take shape. He kind of expounded on that a bit. And, like I said, being a journalist, he worked on it. And I think that's how this reputation got put out there. Frankly, I don't buy into harbinger of doom theories. Quite frankly, when this stuff started happening in 2017, and my name was getting out there as one of the researchers, I literally had 20 to 25 people call me per day in the middle of around July and August who were scared to death. And these were citizens in Chicago, scared to death that these sightings meant some type of harbinger for the city of Chicago. And people were scared. I mean, and I tried to tamp that down, but, they were quite concerned about it. So, but no, I don't really believe the harbinger theories. I just don't really see much evidence of that. Of course, Chicago's a violent city like most cities. And I don't think the flying humanoids have anything to do with that. I just don't think that there's much correlation between what has been going on, even with this COVID thing. I've had people try to connect that to it. I just don't think there's any correlation to it.
COVID's everywhere, and Mothman reports aren't. So that's all the evidence that I need, frankly. But as far as John Keel is concerned, I grew up reading Keel, and he was one of my favorite authors and one of my biggest influences. And as an adult, my degree is in English, so I understand creative writing and narrative structure and things like that. And so Keel was a journalist, but he was also a storyteller, and he knew how to craft a narrative, and that's what he did. I think he understood that people want their stories to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so the Mothman prophecies did, and the collapse of the Silver Bridge in 67, it created the sort of perfect narrative ending that I think he was looking for this particular story. And that's it. I don't think, like Lon has said, there's really much evidence to my mind, especially considering that the sightings in that area persisted. I mean, Small Town Monsters has what looks to be a really excellent documentary coming out soon that documents, further sightings in that immediate area. So they didn't really ever stop. It's just that, he found a good ending for the book, and that was it. And now here we are, people contacting us worried that, Chicago is going to collapse or whatever. And there's just no evidence that it's going to. I wish people just wouldn't worry about it, frankly.
Oh, those are good answers. Those are very good answers. Dave, do you have a question before I move on to this next one here?
No, I'm good,
Anything
brother.
you wanna add?
Enjoy it.
Okay?
Now I'm just.
Hey, I hope everyone's having a good time still. I know I am.
This is great. I'm just loving it. I'm just loving watching and listening, man. It's great right now.
Perfect.
No, I'll be honest with you. When I saw the Mothman Prophecies movie, I mean, I was just shaking my head. I read the book. The book was good, but as far as facts go, the movie itself was, it had a lot of liberties put into it, which, we in the paranormal world will attest that, like TV shows and productions about cryptids and the paranormal, they're geared to entertaining people. It's not geared to really putting facts out there. I have rarely seen anything that really deals with the facts, other than what our friend Seth Breedlove over Small Town Monsters has done. He's probably one of the better of the filmmakers when it comes to the paranormal. He gets right to the witnesses, gets right to the narrative, and doesn't screw around. And this next movie he's got coming up is going to have a lot of heralding Mothman sightings since Point Pleasant.
Wow.
I have heard a lot of them. Many of them had come directly to me. And I believe it's going to kind of open a few eyes when that movie's released.
Oh, that's fantastic. I look forward to that. Very much look forward to that. With a lot of these cryptids, especially Bigfoot and Mothman, to really bring up, two of the bigger ones here, people report feelings of dread and uneasiness when they're around or when they're approaching. Are people still experiencing this with the more recent Mothman sightings? I mean, yeah, same exact thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a particular incident that happened in Chicago. Actually, it was two of them, but the one in particular was the one where it was a couple from Washington were visiting the mother of the woman, and they were out about 9:00 in the evening, walking, just out for a walk. Nice evening, nice summer evening, and as they were walking in front of the condo, and now this was on Lakeshore Drive. This is right across from the lake. This winged being flew right in front of them through the trees up the building, the condominium, and got to the top and just like hovered up there like it was looking through a window. And then arched its back and started diving towards the trees. By this time, this couple was running towards the door to get into this place. And about halfway there, this thing descended right in front of them, descended and hovered right in front of them over the sidewalk. And they were probably like 6-7 foot in front of this thing. Like most of the descriptions, it was a emaciated, kind of black, even shiny, wet-looking being with these gargoyle-like wings, black in color. It was actually vibrating. It had the red eyes. They said the vibration was so intense they could actually feel it. And the woman lost all control of her legs. She fell to the ground. Had this sense of dread that actually they were supposed to, when this is all said and done, they were supposed to fly back to Washington the next day. They stayed in Chicago for 3 days because she couldn't get herself out of the condo to go to the airport. Well, anyway, that's one incident where it took on a physical manifestation with the witness. And there was another one in Bolingbrook, Illinois, where this woman would nightly go out and do a walk in the neighborhood. It was about 10:00 at night. She was cutting through a local playground, and she walked up the sidewalk and came across this tall being that she actually thought were two people embracing. But it was so tall, they thought maybe it had an umbrella coming from them. But when she got close to it, it actually slowly turned towards her. Now, she didn't see it face her eyes because the wings were wrapped around it. And it was giving off this gurgling sound. Now, I believe this thing was sleeping, but I think it sensed that she was there. And she got pretty close to it, and she lost control of her legs as well. And she tried to get away from it. Now, it didn't chase her or anything. It stayed there. But she had to sit down at a nearby bench just to gather herself and to get enough strength to get back home. When she did get back home, she told her son about it. They jumped in the car. He wanted to see it. And this thing actually did kind of jump out of a bush when they went by. So he saw it. They got back home again, Googled, called me, and man, I'm telling you, that was an interesting conversation I had. Those people were totally freaked out.
Now,
I mean, that was
it's amazing.
Lon, let me jump in real quick.
I mean, so that's just two examples of the way people reacted to this thing. And you talked about the doom thing. I have heard, not the doom, but the feeling of dread. I have heard that many times.
But
many
Lon,
times.
is there a way to console these people when you talk to them?
It is interesting when you talk to them, because a lot of times they do ask you if you think this thing's going to come back and bother them. And I can't tell them yes or no, but I do try to relay what others have had happen to them, and that they haven't had this thing come back and bother them. But they are concerned, even to the point I'm quite sure there are many, many more sightings where people were scared to even contact us because they felt this thing may have actually know they're doing that.
Yeah, that's
how intense these encounters are.
Yeah, what Lon's talking about, like, that's literally something I have had multiple witnesses expressed to me as a concern, that somehow just in the act of talking about their going to incite some kind of reprisal. Like, this thing is going to know that they were talking about it, and it's going to invite it back into their life, which is, of course, is the last thing that they want, because they're terrified. So, I mean, it's a common narrative. Yeah.
Some of these, I've talked to people for many, many years about encounters and sightings they've had, but I tell you, some of the most intense conversations I've had with people have been something to do with this winged being, not only in Chicago, but in general. There has to be, in my opinion, some type of mental manifestation that these things exude. You've had people talk about, with Sasquatch or Bigfoot, that there's something that it causes people to not react to them. Even with the upright canines, dogman encounters, it's the same thing, that, back away, don't bother me, because, it may lead to something worse than what, you're experiencing now. I think these cryptids, for the most part, do possess that ability to kind of get people to back away from them. And I think with this winged humanoid, I think it's the same thing.
We've had like the Oz Park incident. The lady said that when she walked to the park, she'd go there every day to walk. She said going into the park, there was no birds singing, there's no noise whatsoever, and she practically had to drag her dog along. The dog usually wants to go out there and run around in the park. And it was a little Jack Russell Terrier. And if you know these things, they're high energy and they're very brave dogs, and they're very protective of their owners. She rounded the corner and she came face to face with this thing. It actually had its back turned to her, and when it turned around, it sensed her. It turned around and she was able to see the eyes. She said that it's about 6-7 feet tall, but the wings stood another 1.5 foot taller than the creature itself. She says that she got this feeling of just overwhelming dread, like it was saying, that it could rip her limb for limb without even trying. And not only that, the dog was behind her. It was cowering behind her. And I've had people had Jack Russells, and they don't back down from anything. They're meant to go after animals and hunt and stuff, and this thing wanted nothing to do with it. As far as the summoning back up, a lot of the reports that we took, I did a lot of the interviews and the investigations in Little Village, because I could speak Spanish to them, and so many of these people, they were so afraid to talk about it for that reason, because to them, it was a product of a bruja, a witch, and they didn't want, or a demon. They were calling it a demonio, which is demon in Spanish, or a duende, which is like a goblin. And they were afraid, if I talk about this, this thing's going to come back and hurt my family. The one gentleman that saw it at the pond in O'Hare, he says he started praying immediately to the Virgin Mary, to the Virgin of Guadalupe, to protect him, because he felt like he was seeing a demon. And people were just afraid. They didn't want to talk about it. They give me their stories, but after that, they didn't want to go into details. They didn't want to go into, anything really other than just, the short, quick answers, because they were afraid. This thing was going to come back after them eventually.
Man, can I jump in here real quick? I gotta say something about this. You guys remind me of being in a O'Hare Airport ready room, because I'm always the weirdo talking about paranormal stuff with everybody, and I'll walk up and I'll just be like, "Hey, did anybody see Mothman today?" And it's funny to me. You'll have 3 or 4 people that will jump up and say, "Oh yeah, my dad saw it in an alley in Berwyn," and they'll start telling me the story. Then another guy will start telling me, "Oh, well, I posted this on Facebook about what I saw, on the north side of Chicago." This is what I really like talking to you guys about Mothman about, because you guys remind me of these people that just have all these natural, normal stories that come out about Mothman.
Well, you need to start redirecting these people to us, because we want to talk.
We will talk to them. We want to get these. We're actually starting a summer initiative where we're actually trying to reach out to more people.
Well, you guys are super cool. You came on the show and you helped us out, man. I'll help you guys out as much as I can. How about it, Michael?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
One of the few things about this is, one of the great things about the investigation that I've had since the beginning is, trying to, prove, it's proving that, hey, it's not this, it's not that. I think the whole team can speak for that. Ruling out, basically taking that virtual whiteboard and just, Xing out, it can't be this, it can't be that, it can't, it sure as hell isn't this. I mean, one of the first people who came to us was saying, "Oh, you're seeing some guy in a flight suit." Like, I'm seeing a flight suit fly under a bridge in Chicago with river traffic up and down the bridge, or flying between buildings. Gutter would know. There's an effect in Chicago. You turn that corner, you get hit by the wind that's going down the street, because it's become a wind tunnel.
Wow. Hey, Tobias, it really sounds like you guys do your due diligence on your investigations.
We definitely try. One of the things I think is most important, as far as I don't know if convincing is the right word, but at least getting people to accept that this is something that is happening to people, whatever it is being as open and honest as possible. Like, you go through these cases, and the fact is, some of them are, more credible than others. And usually that's because, we've had limited contact with witnesses or something. But that doesn't mean that those cases are invalid necessarily. I mean, there is a minimum level of contact that we will require before any case is even published. Like, I think we're all probably sitting on quite a few cases that really haven't even been put out there because you couldn't follow up on it, and you don't want to add to a bunch of white noise on the internet regarding something, like if you really can't nail the facts of it down and stuff. And so I think that something that's important that people need to understand is what they're seeing when they see all of these sightings. These are just the sightings where we were actually able to speak to somebody and really felt like it was investigated well enough that it was worth sharing. And so, like, that's not even everything that's been received necessarily. And I've been as open and honest, and all of us have, obviously, as far as sort of what's gone into every single sighting report, as far as investigation, because again, like there's varying levels of contact with witnesses and sort of what they're comfortable with. Some people are like, yeah, sure, come on over. I'll walk you around the sighting area. And, other people, like they want to just kind of get it off their chest and they don't ever want to talk about it again. And so you just kind of get what you get. But as long as you are, again, being open and honest about it, I think any person who is looking at this objectively has to see that and go, okay, I might not agree with everybody's conclusions about what this is, and frankly, I don't know what it is. But at the end of the day, you have to recognize that these people are experiencing something, and they're not making it up. We're not making it up. Like, they exist, and something's happening, and that's what's important.
I just don't have time to sit around making up stories. I put stuff every day on the blog.
Right.
And if I start doing that, I start losing control of what I'm writing. And I start losing control of disseminating the lies from the truth. And then when somebody tries to question me about it, then I'll get stories mixed up. I just don't have time to do that. I've been lucky enough to have I've had two major encounters in my lifetime, one with a Bigfoot and one with a winged humanoid. And I know for a fact that these types of beings exist. I know that. Now I can't convince everybody of that, but I do know that.
Mothman's such a rare sighting. Why would somebody make that up and lie? You know what I'm saying?
That's just it. Why would they do that? And when you talk to people, and when you've experienced it yourself to a degree, I mean, but then again, skeptics are a different breed. I mean, the biggest believer is a skeptic who has something happen to them. Mm-hmm. They become a true believer in the bigger sense, and I've seen it happen. So, yeah, I mean, people are going to talk. People are going to, try to dispel anything that it just doesn't seem normal or is weird to them. But as investigators, you first of all you take the benefit, you give the witness the benefit of the doubt, then you go from there and try to disprove them eternally. But if you can't dispel what they're telling you, and they're not changing the stories, and then they're starting to get followed up by other witnesses, then you've got something. And what's been going on in the Chicago and the surrounding area over the past decade or so is, in my opinion, something that's very believable and needs to be put out there.
And
Absolutely.
Tobias is right. We do have quite a lot. I mean, I'm sure Tobias and Lon get tons of reports. I get them every day. And I mean, if I'm looking at the report that comes in and the first line down here is like, I was sitting on the roof smoking some meth when I saw the Mothman. The first thing I'm going to do is just hit the delete button and go on to the next one. But you would be surprised. I mean,
yeah, you got to be credible.
Yeah, I was sitting on the roof and I saw a Klingon bird of prey dematerialize in front of me and fly over the city. And yeah, you have to kind of, for the lack of a better term,
But you know what, Manny? Sometimes the stories are that outlandish. Some of the craft that I have seen flying over, they're bizarre. They're quite undescribable. And when you try to share it with someone, of course, people are going to say, "This dude's nuts." But I'm only explaining what I've seen. Manny, you understand what I'm saying?
I truly and completely agree with you. I mean, if I go up to somebody right now, if I go to somebody at work and tell them, hey, I saw this guy with huge wings fly over my house, they're going to commit me because they're going to think I'm just either was drunk, high, or I'm just crazy. But you have to you have to kind of take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt, because you can tell after doing this so long, Tobias and Lon can agree that you kind of develop that that sixth sense that, you can tell when somebody's being sincere. And it also, this is where your investigative skills have to come in, because you have to follow up with everybody. It doesn't matter. I mean, unless it's straight out outlandish, like the one example, I'm sitting on the roof and smoking meth and I saw something. Yeah, well, no, I'm not going to follow up with you. But if you're telling me that, hey, I saw this UFO fly by and I saw, little green men, that's, that's going to be, something that I'm going to take. In fact, and this is going kind of a little off subject, but what my favorite UFO story of all times is the most outlandish story. I actually call it, hillbillies versus aliens. It's the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter.
Love that one.
These people were,
wow.
This was the personification of the Clampets. Shoot first, ask questions. They're heavily armed people. And these things just appeared and started appearing in the door. Well, the first thing they do is they live by the law of Granny Clamp, laid down by Granny Clamp. They started shooting. So the whole night, shots are ringing out all over the place. And they went to the cops. The cops came out, and nothing. The cops leave. 10 minutes later, these things are back, and the shooting resumes till daylight. If I go to anybody right now and tell them that, the first thing they're going to ask me for is, for a drug test. But it's it's a UFO legend. And to think about it, it's one of the most out there stories that you've ever heard, but you kind of have to take it. These people were, you have to kind of look at it from an investigative point. These people were not trying to, they did more damage to their house than they could afford. They were dirt poor. They weren't looking for fame. They didn't want any kind of, notoriety. They didn't want any kind of attention. Half these witnesses that come to us, they want to tell us what's going on, and they want to get on with their lives. The TSA officer that we had, he said, I'm not looking to commit career suicide. I've been here for, I'm coming close to retirement. I'm not looking to torpedo my career. The O'Hare, the pilots, they said, they were forthright, but they weren't going to go out there and put their names and reputations on the line, because, there's consequences to this.
Yes, that's why I've used the moniker Gutter Gawker for all these years. I wanted to protect my own personal life, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And so you can tell you can tell when someone's not being serious or sincere. Eventually you will, you kind of get that sixth sense. And that's why there's a team. I can go to Lon, I can go to Tobias, I can go to Butch, I can go to anybody on my team and tell them, hey, here's what I got. And they're going to tell me, this is, this photo's fake. This doesn't sound right. There's inconsistencies here, it's the only way that you're going to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Excellent stuff, guys. You guys are great. Michael, what do you got for us, brother?
I think I'll be honest with you, I think we're going to wrap it up fairly shortly here. I do want to thank everyone for coming on tonight. You guys are fascinating people before I knew you, and now that I've had a chance to talk to you a little bit, that's only been solidified 100-fold, and I do hope that we can do it again.
I love it. You guys are great. You guys please come back.
It's awesome.
With us.
Oh,
yeah, this is fantastic. So yeah, of course, anytime.
Is there anything you guys want to share, links or websites or anything?
Well, I'm going to rename those.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I'm just going to spit those websites out again, so you guys don't have to do that. And again, all of those are in the description, guys. You can check those out. So Tobias is at singularfortean.com. All right, he's changed that name, so now it's just singularfortean.com. And Lon is at phantomsandmonsters.com, and you can also listen to him on Arcane Radio. Definitely check him out if you haven't already. And you can reach Manny on UFOclearinghouse.com. Please go and check him out as well. Every one of these guys here are established, and they are successful in their own respective parts of the field. As you guys have heard tonight, the knowledge coming from these individuals is reflective of their experience, of their research, and of their own in-depth thinking. And I have been honored to be part of this show with you guys tonight. And thank you very much for coming on this panel, guys.
Well, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Can I actually say one last thing, if you don't mind?
Please.
We are
Not at all.
UFO Clearinghouse is actually starting their summer initiative. I've kind of been posting around a little bit, but this summer initiative is meant to get the word out. I'm got flyers coming up and everything. I'm going to be out, putting my son to work to post flyers. But this, if you have had a sighting, UFO, cryptid, winged humanoid, whether it's in Chicago, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, please call us, write us. You can reach any one of us, and your anonymity is guaranteed. We're not going to post your information out. It's going to be thoroughly investigated. And, if you wish to remain anonymous, even if you don't want us to publish that report, that's perfectly fine. But don't hold those reports in, because what you're doing is hindering the search for the truth. I mean,
That's how I found you guys. I emailed Manny right away, and he got back to me, and he helped me set this up. This is great, and I hope that you guys let me talk to you more about my Mothman and UFO sightings.
Oh, definitely.
I hope we get into that a lot more. What a great show tonight. You guys are great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Once again, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I see you guys in the chat. Sorry, tonight I really didn't get in there. I was just glued to every last word that was pouring out here.
Enthralled.
So, I'll do better next time. So it's absolutely, completely enthralled. Again, thank you, everybody, for coming out. And we're going to wrap it up now. But we will see you again. I think we're doing something tomorrow, but Gutter will talk about that. And we have somebody coming on next week.
We got
which
Brad
I will
Olson,
leave for the moment. But it's the...
Brad
Okay.
Olson is an esoteric person, and he was on Ancient Aliens, and he wants to come on the show with us. So that'll be next week.
That'll be next week. Stay tuned, guys. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care, y'all.
Good night.
Tobias, Manny, you guys are great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You guys are all stars.
Thank you.
So good. You want me to hang out here, Mike, for a minute?
Yeah, I'm just going to pull everybody backstage. Real quick.